Could you just tell us a bit about who you are today and what you did in the military and why you chose to join the military in the first place?
Sure thing. So at the moment, I'm working in sales for a business called Trustpilot. I'm basically helping businesses build trust online. Been there for a few months and have made the move through the world of sales, and we'll probably come back to that. But when I was in the artillery, I was an officer, joined through Sandhurst and spent 8 years going through the career as a Royal Artillery officer.
What was the hardest part about moving into civilian life, and how did you handle some of those challenges that arose during that period?
There's a few things, right? Like, I think one of them is working out what the hell you want to do. Like, your identity has become army officer. I think and understanding where you fit in is important. Knowing how you go about it. There's a lot of help offered, but not necessarily for what everybody wants to do. Lots of pathways that lead towards big businesses, but if you want to do something smaller, I think that can be a little bit tougher.
Welcome to Beyond the Service podcast. Here we speak with veterans who've made the move from military to civilian life, exploring why and how they made the transition, and sharing hints and tips to support others on the same journey. My guest today is Pete Stanley. Pete served in the Royal Artillery before transitioning into civilian life, where he's since built a successful career in sales. I'm really looking forward to hearing his story. I'm sure he'll have some valuable advice to share. Welcome, Pete.
Hey, Owen, how you doing? You right?
Good, mate. Good to have you on the podcast, mate. Excited for this one. You're the first Royal Artillery person we've had on here, so I'm sure you'll do the corps proud, mate.
Big shoes to fill. They either say gunners are great or awful, so you have to decide which one I am by the end of the podcast.
I'm confident, mate. It'll be the former. Great. Okay. So I suppose the good place to start is, could you just tell us a bit about who you are today and then what you did in the military, and I suppose why you chose to join the military in the first place?
Sure thing. So at the moment, I'm working in sales for a business called Trustpilot, something that I suppose a business that most people should have heard of by now. It's a fairly big brand here in the UK, and I'm basically helping businesses build trust online. Been there for a few months and have made the move through the world of sales, and we'll probably come back to that. But when I was in the artillery, I was an officer, joined through Sandhurst, like way back in 2012, and spent 8 years sort of going through the career as a Royal Artillery officer. Spent my time in close support, so on the gun line, firing with AS-90, then a bit of time in air defence, which is different, and then finished up as an FST commander, so attached to the infantry and trying to control effects on the front end, which was brilliant. You know, I had a great time in the military. The way I kind of found it, I suppose, is a bit by accident. I was sat in a maths class when I was 15, feeling a bit bored, and someone came in and asked if anyone wanted to join the military. So I shot my hand up to get myself out of maths, got myself a fairly big commitment from there with a scholarship and bits and pieces, and 8 years of service. But, you know, dodging maths wasn't a bad way to end up in the military.
Fair one, mate. Fair one. Yeah, I can. If I'd have been able to dodge maths, but for that, I would have done the same thing, mate. But I imagine there's a fair bit of maths in the artillery as well. I suppose it came in handy eventually at some point.
Yeah, a little bit. Thankfully, had computers and some really good soldiers around me to do most of the hard work. I just sat there and tried to not mess everything up.
Nice. And what I suppose, you know, for a lot of the audience, this will be veterans themselves, but there'll be some people I'm sure are not. But you know, could you talk me through the reasons you kind of chose to go down the artillery route? What was that something you responded into? What was your kind of thought process around that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the artillery was a really good fit for me because it was described at the time as a broad church. I think that's what the regimental colonel called it. As a chance to do lots of different things and enjoy yourself. I was able to play sport, do quite a lot of AT, and also do some good soldiering as well. And that kind of appealed to me. When it came to the job itself, I think like having more opportunity to spend time around soldiers was appealing. You've got this sort of third job as an FST commander where you can lead troops, lead soldiers, be working day to day rather than being an ops officer or something where you're a bit more behind a desk. And that kind of appealed to me with the gunners. And yeah, a brilliant group of people, a brilliant community, and had a great time there.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? It's I think there's some great jobs in the military, certainly early on, where you get, a lot of responsibility at a very young age. Did you think like your training and kind of Sandhurst and everything had prepared you for that challenge, or was it still quite a lot to learn?
I think I had a lot to learn at Sandhurst, I'll tell you that. Anyone who went through Sandhurst with me will realize that I definitely developed in the 44 weeks that I was there. I was not very good at the start. And yeah, I think it sets you up to be very resilient, right? Like just being prepared to take on a challenge and give something a go. There's like lots of phrases, leaders legs, no cuff too tough. You're sort of forced into a lot of situations. You just have to perform. And I think that's pretty much what Sandhurst trains you to do. It trains you to give it a go, like be able to deal with problems, deal with things on the fly and be quite agile. And I think that's how Sandhurst kind of prepared you for being an officer, because to be honest, nothing can, right? Like the job is so varied, whether you're dealing with someone going to court one day or dealing with trying to put a vehicle on the road the next, you really don't know what's going to be going on. And yeah, I think that's probably what I learned, just being adaptable at Sandhurst and honestly, like finding humor in really, really tough periods is the thing that Sandhurst teaches you. You're pushed to your limits in lots of ways, and being able just to laugh through stuff is I think pretty relevant for when you get to unit, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I've often had some questions from people about, at 20 odd years old, like, you're commanding. In my instance, I was in the infantry, so it was 30 soldiers at the time, and you probably had similar or maybe even more in the artillery in your first command. And it's this training does prepare you, and you're right. There's that resilience piece, and there's that bit of just dealing with chaos, and every single day at Sandhurst there's something different thrown at you. But I think as well it boils down to like you come in and you've got some really amazing people around you, like platoon sergeant or corporals and various different command people who've been in there a lot longer. They may report into you, but I think there's that kind of that understanding that they need to help shape you into a good leader as well.
100%. I think you've got the phrase is often used as subordinates, but they're very, very kind to you. I think it's a bit of a disservice to talk about some of the people I've worked with as like subordinates. Like I've learned so much from people who, although you have like a rank over, you just don't have the experience, the knowledge. And it's kind of a running joke, right? Like you're kind of having your hand held through, but you're going to be called boss or sir as you kind of do it. It's quite wholesome, really. I've definitely learned a lot more from my soldiers than they've probably learned from me.
Yeah, certainly. But I think it's right, isn't it? It's I think a lot of people, and one of the views of veterans and in the civilian world, I think, can be it's very hierarchical. You need these very rigid structures, and how are you going to work, particularly in the sort of SME space? Like, how are you going to work where there's a lot flatter hierarchies and there's not, you're not really sure who's the boss. And I think that's a misconception because, like you say, like, if you go in thinking I'm a leader, listen to me, do what I say, it just doesn't work because you understand that, yeah, you might have a rank slide, you might have a seniority, but when it comes down to it, there's guys and girls there who've got much more experience than you have. And if you don't lean on them, if you don't listen to them, then you're not going to get anywhere. And I think people are surprised by that with veterans, that they're willing to work with anybody, and they understand that everyone's got their part to play, and it's not just about a rank or a job title. It's actually, what's this person bringing to the table, and how can I learn, as well as being able to make a decision at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%. I think like the elements of the military are quite unique when it comes to leading people. You've got obviously management, which is everywhere in the civilian world. Leadership, which is in spades in the military and isn't always everywhere in the civilian world. And then the unique part, which is command. And I think people can sometimes like mistake command for leadership, like having that rank, having that sort of rank slide, as you kind of said there. That's not really the important bit, right? Like anyone can be a leader, whether it's someone with a junior rank, they can step up and come up with some really good ideas. And that's kind of, I think, the biggest crossover in leadership that I've seen to leaving the military is you don't have to be the boss to still be a leader in a business. And that's kind of my advice to people going forward, is don't lose that ability to do the right thing. Even if you're not the boss or the manager or, the director, whatever the title might be, you can still be that leader day to day. And and bring that stuff across. And that's what's really expected from people from the military when you leave. So that's kind of what I'd say on that stuff.
Great. Okay. So, obviously, you enjoyed your time in the military, had some great experience, I'm sure. But what kind of, like, why did you decide to leave the military, and what was going through your mind during that period? Like, what made you make that decision?
It's an interesting one, right? Everyone's got their own sort of reasons for leaving. I think it kind of boils down to a few things for me. One was I spent a tremendous amount of time away. I think on my like nights away from bed in 2.5 years, I did 450, and I didn't go to Afghanistan or Iraq. We weren't going on off to warfight at that point. That seemed a bit crazy. It didn't seem very conducive to me like having a long-term relationship with somebody. I was afraid I could be a bit of a warrior monk, married to the job, which definitely would have had its appeals, I think, at times, but maybe not when you're quite. Yeah, maybe not a little bit later in life. So that was kind of one of the things. It was like moving on to that next point, hit 30, sort of, I think, a pretty good point to lift your head up. And then I think that ultimately the bit that kind of like the twig that snapped the camel's back is I went for a grading board and I didn't get the job I wanted, right? So it was like I've had my shot there. If I'm not going to get exactly what I want, I'm probably not going to get it later down the line. So this is probably a good time to lift my head up. That was probably the straw that broke the camel's back, but it would be like unfair to me for me to say that I didn't get the job I wanted, so I left. But that was it, right? And then obviously a year's notice period, so you've got a bit of time to dwell on things, and you get a few offers dangled your way. But I think once I made my mind up, it was pretty hard to sort of turn my head. I was ready to go, still prepared to work hard and all that stuff, but yeah, it was time for me to get out.
Yeah. It is an interesting point for anyone that's going through that transition, because I think there's so many varying reasons why people leave. And, when I'm sort of doing some mentoring or conversation with people who are leaving, I always try and understand that point, because I think that can shape what you do next in a big way. And unfortunately, some people like you and I had, chose to leave on our own terms for whatever reason, and we decided, well, this is the right point. It's harder then for people who are leaving because, it's outside of their control, medical discharge, or come to the end of their service and there's no other jobs or whatever. But I think it's so important to understand why you're leaving, because there will be times when you leave, and I'm sure we'll come on to it, where you think, have I made the right call? And it might be during that year of resettlement where you're thinking, I don't know what I want to do now, or the jobs haven't come in like I'd expect. And particularly in this current climate where job seeking is difficult, there will be people that will always be questioning, like, have I made the right choice? And I think it's always trying to come back to that, like, no, you've left for a reason, understand that. And then, once you made the decision, then just back yourself and move forward.
100%. You've got to go through a lot of clicks to make it happen.
Yeah.
You've got to be pretty sure of it, right? So I think having that North Star and knowing why it's not right for you is so important. I completely agree.
And so you made that decision to leave, and it sounds like you were ready for it, and you kind of made that decision based on what you wanted to do next. But what was the hardest part about moving into civilian life, and how did you handle some of those challenges that arose during that period?
There's a few things, right? Like, I think one of them is working out what the hell you want to do. Like, your identity has become army officer or sergeant or whatever it is. You've become this army person. Like, my friends would call me Army Pete, which sounds so funny now, but at the time, you're like, that's just what it is. I think that understanding where you fit in is important. Knowing how you go about it. There's a lot of help offered, but not necessarily for what everybody wants to do. Lots of pathways that lead towards big businesses, but if you want to do something smaller, I think that can be a little bit tougher. And I think, like, speaking more broadly, like, one of the hardest things is leaving the sort of family that you're in. Like, we use the phrase brotherhood. Obviously, that's not like, you work with some really, really strong women as well, but that's very much like the belonging, the feeling that you're part of something is tough. Perhaps not when you're sort of leaving, but you definitely reflect once you've left. That's something that you won't really feel again. And I've spoken to lots of veterans around that being quite challenging. That's probably the toughest thing to deal with afterwards. I think when it came to working out what I wanted to do, that was probably the most immediate sort of challenge I faced, right? So my process was you would be put towards a sort of scheme, military scheme at like an Amazon or a Lloyd's or Barclays or a big bank, lots of financial institutions. And the sort of impression I got from people is that that's what a good job was. That's what you should be doing. And when I started looking at this stuff, it just was so far away from what I really wanted to do. It didn't really fit me. It felt like going from a really big organization where you're, albeit an important cog, but quite a small cog in a big organization. I didn't really feel like that's what I wanted to do straight away. A lot of pressure, weirdly, from like the people that you work with in the mess. When you start talking about what job you want to do, and it's sort of 2 months out, and you're not on a scheme with Barclays or Goldman Sachs or Amazon, people are, oh, what's Stanner's going to do? And I'm like, oh, I'm not sure what I want to do either, but the jobs I want, they're not going to give me something until I'm about a month out, so I can't find anything. So I guess that was a challenge, and finding my route. Like there were points where I was worried about, like I was a month out from the end of my time in the military, and I was like, I haven't found anything yet. Where am I going to be working? Like, how am I going to pay that sort of month's rent? You obviously put some money away and stuff, but you're like, oh, what happens if I don't find something? You're going to ask yourself that question and go into some interesting places. But it will normally be all right. Like I turned around, I found my job and was employed within 3 days of my first interview. Like I got that job and then immediately went on a holiday to Bali for 2 weeks and came back and started work in the January, which was pretty nice. But I suppose that's probably the challenge, right? Like understanding where you want to go and then justifying it to yourself and not being too worried about it if it's a little bit different to what all your muckers are doing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective because mine was slightly different. I did go on to one of these big military schemes, and so I was like, great, I've got a job, and it's and it didn't work out. I think because very quickly I realized what you'd already worked out, that it wasn't the right culture for me. But it is difficult, I think, if you've decided actually that's not the route I want to go down. I don't want to take the proven route of going into the city and becoming a project manager, and where you do kind of get pigeonholed and pushed down that route certainly as an army officer you do anyway. It must be quite challenging to think, well, I don't want to, and it's great to know what you don't want to do. That's probably one of the main things. Figure out what you don't want to do first, but then it's trying to figure out what you do want to do, and then particularly if you're going into a smaller business, they're not going to wait 6 to 12 months. So you've got to almost be prepared to take on a bit of risk and go, yeah, I know what I don't want to do. I figured out where I would see myself, and it's now backing yourself to then hold on that bit longer and kind of then wait for the right opportunity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think finding out what you want to do is so important. For me, it was done through like speaking to my friends I'd had from university and before the military. I don't sort of cast off those people that have gone through it before, because you're going to have to join at probably it depends, I suppose. I had to join at sort of more junior level because I wanted to go into the world of sales. But like I spoke to some friends and they were just like, Pete, this is going to be the perfect fit for you. Like they knew me very well. They understand what I'm all about. And yeah, having my eyes open to something a little bit different where you could be a bit more entrepreneurial was very, very appealing. So I think leaning on your network, whether that's sort of recent service leavers who've done something different, or people that you've kind of had from university or friends or whatever from outside is so important.
That's such an interesting point, actually. I'd be the first person to say that, where there is this big thing about network, isn't there? Networking. And I think a lot of service leavers look at, right, who's gone out. I'm going to speak to Owen, I'm going to speak to Pete, I'm going to speak to whoever who's at Amazon or Morgan Stanley or whatever, and find out what they did and just do that, where it's actually interesting that you've gone to civilian mates and tried to figure out what they've done, what they think your skills could be. And that's probably something that a lot of veterans don't do. They don't go and speak to civilians. They just focus on people who've done what they've done or been through that transition. And actually you gain so much intel and so much information from people who have just been in the civilian world and understand that world better than most veterans ever will.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I was kind of forced to do it though, right? Like the proven route was not going into the world of recruitment or going into the world of sales. It seems like there's more people who are looking to try and do it in the last 5 years since I've left anyway, but there wasn't a network that I could easily tap into. I think I had a couple of conversations later on, but not when I was leaving. It was all KPMG, PwC, EY, those kinds of things. And I had to turn around to my friends. I was just like, this is not right for me. Like being a consultant, I've got some friends who are very, very good consultants and they love it, but it wasn't quite right for me. So I was kind of pushed that way, and yeah, definitely challenging, but a lot of fun.
So then when you kind of moved into your early career at the military, was there any particular lessons that you learned, any big wins or any mistakes that you think are relevant?
Yeah, 100%. So my first job out of the military was I moved into the world of recruitment, and like how I got that job was they actually tried to recruit me for another sales job. It's quite like, I suppose, like an Inception. You go in for a job interview and you leave with another job. It was a good path for me, and lots of challenges, right? I think the first challenge that I kind of had was coming out into the job that I wanted to do meant taking a fairly big like pay cut on my basic salary. Particularly moving to London, you're like, I don't want to be coming down from the 50 grand I was being paid as an army officer to going back to like what a graduate might be paying. And that was something I had to kind of like quantify in my head. Is that something that's a good move? Like, am I going to be able to make that back? And you have to kind of work it out. I suppose the benefit of the jobs that I was looking at is that there was quite a big commission element where you can make that on top. And that was kind of what I backed myself to do. So yeah, the first challenge was like working my head around that. Like, is it possible to make commission? Do I back myself? Do I trust this? And yeah, like the first 3 months in the job I was in was brilliant. I landed in a place that was very, very young. I was probably the second oldest person in the business. At the age of 30, it was like a really fun creative agency, great people, like amazing office. Definitely like a place for a young person to be working in London. And I thoroughly recommend it to anyone who's leaving at that point in life. But it all changed pretty quickly, right? So I left in January 2020, and what a time to give up a really, really stable career to go into something where you've taken a big pay cut to try and place people into jobs when the world stopped, right? Like no one was, I remember in the office laughing about Corona, thinking, oh, we've been sent home for the weekend. It was like a trial. I didn't go back to work until October, right? I was on furlough for 8 months, which was just insane, right? Like being paid even less at that point. Very, very thankful for the business for some of the moves they made to look after us, but a really, really tough time, I'll be honest. And that was like the thing I kind of learned through that was like, it's really, really tough when you can't control an outcome. Like when you have no ability to change anything, I find that very, very tough and very frustrating. Like we've typically come from the military where we can be put in situations that are pretty awful or really tough or testing if we're in training, but you can generally try and have an action that can stop it. When you're sat at home on your sofa and you're not allowed to work, like that was pretty rough. Spent some time with the Army Reserve there, which was really useful. So that's one of my tips: is don't like burn the boats when you leave. Like maybe keep that support network, because it was brilliant for me. Like being able to just pop in and do some work with NRHQ down in Woolwich when everyone else was on lockdown kind of saved my mental health a lot. But that was really a big challenge, a big resilience. Like coming out from there and getting into the job more properly, things went really, really well. Like the job market picked up in October, November, December, went really, really big. And I kind of learned that, and it's so cliche, but hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. There were people in that business who'd done the job for a lot longer than me and performed really, really well. But I think like if you're really, really hungry and you really, really want it, it's going to help you out. And that was kind of what I established at the start. Just try and work as hard as possible, make more calls, try and send one more email, work longer hours, be the first in, last out. It's really, really like drilled into in the military, very easy stuff to do. But that's the kind of learnings I had for the first year and a half, 2 years of my recruitment journey, was just work really hard. It's the thing you can control. And if you can do that, you'll generally be all right. So that was my big learning. Be prepared to, lean in and work hard.
Yeah. And it's, I think if you come out of the military thinking, oh, Civvy Street's going to be easier, and that's just not the right attitude. I think what I always say to people is don't lower, because I think in the military we always try and raise the bar and standards are high, and whether that's turning up early, leaving late, doing extra. It's not just about ticking a box, do your job. It's, what else can you do? How can you add value? I always say to people coming out, it's like, don't lower yourself to the standards. If the standards are lower, try and raise the standards of that organization if you can, and tempering some of the language and some of the ways you go about things potentially. But there's definitely things you can do around that. And I think, what a tough time to come out into the market. I was in the recruitment market at that point as well. It was not easy, so fair play. But I think one of the things you said, damn, it really rung true, is like I think particularly if you're going into an SME, you may need to look at it and go, I'm going to have to take a hit here on money. And I always caveat when I'm talking to veterans is like, I don't know your situation. If you can't take less money, then that's just something you need to figure out. And maybe that will then direct where your job focus is. But if you can, and you want to do something and you see the potential in it, you might have to take that hit for a year, 2 years to kind of build yourself back up. And because, you don't undervalue yourself. You're coming out with a lot of skills, a lot of experience, but and a lot of characteristics that a business will absolutely benefit from. What you will lack is subject matter expertise or knowledge within that sector or within that industry. Or so if you can do it and that's what you want to do, then don't let money be the deciding factor. There's lots of people I've spoken to said, I'd love to do this, but the money's, I'm not going to get the same amount of money straight away. So I decided to go and be a project manager. And you're like, fine, but can you take that hit? What do you need to do in your life to change that means you can take that hit for a bit of time and then go again? And I did the same thing after leaving Deloitte. I went into recruitment and made the call that I'm going to take a hit for a while, but I'm going to back myself because there's a potential to earn money. And so that's really interesting. Not easy and not something everyone can do. So I'm not saying for everyone to do that, but definitely something to consider.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Great. So in terms of, obviously, you've gone into more small and medium-sized businesses and it sounds like you've had a great experience, challenging times as well. But what do you, and I've got my own opinions on this, but what do you think small and mid-sized businesses are, or why do you think they're a good place for veterans, and how is it different from the military, or how can, what do you think you bring to the table as a veteran in those organizations?
I think you've got a real chance to make an impact, right? Like you've kind of spoken about a few things and I completely agree. Don't change the sort of standards, the values you've got. Like they're going to help you stand out. People might laugh at you a little bit for like always dressing really smart, or whatever your thing is, or turning up on time, like never being late for a meeting or getting upset when people are late. But like hold to that kind of stuff. And that's going to help you stand out. Like when you're in a small business, you're going to be exposed to so much more about how a business works. If you've got anything entrepreneurial in you and you've ever got the ambition to maybe start your own business in the future, going into a small business is a really good place to sort of scratch that itch. Understand, okay, like how does finance work? How does a marketing function work? What is sales all about? Like you start to understand different parts of a business, how they work together. And then you're often like more involved with the strategic direction of the business as well. Like the business I was part of we're almost a business within a business. We're a recruitment function within a sort of marketing agency essentially. And then I was building my own business within that recruitment business, right? So I was winning my own accounts. I was talking to my own things. I was doing the delivery myself. I was then going to finance and liaising in that way. So you're exposed to a lot more, I think, in a small business. I think the ability to progress in a small business is generally much faster. There might be less of a sort of pathway. If you're someone who is wedded to like a military pathway where it's a career that's a straight line, you might be better served in a bigger business. You're definitely going to have more of a squiggly line career. If you decide to go to a small business, you might choose a business that, you know what, it's not quite right for you. You've got to go to another one. There's definitely risk there, but the ability to really accelerate and push yourself forward is there in a small business. You can go from being an individual contributor, fairly junior, to running the whole shop in a couple of years. I've seen lots of people do it within sales organizations and within software businesses. I've seen people go on that journey. So that career acceleration, I think, is important. And if I'm honest, I think in some ways, like particularly with the industries that we've been in, the earning potential is so much bigger. Which I spoke about taking a big pay cut in a small to medium business to go in there to earn, but because I was the only person working my market and it was very lucrative for a period of time, I was making triple my basic salary, 4 times my basic salary within 2 or 3 years, right? So it was very, very profitable to make that move. And I don't know if you would be able to do that in his larger business. I think you'd probably struggle to scale at that period, at that sort of pace that you would have there. I know the other part is like, how is it different to the military? And I think in some ways an SMB is quite similar to the military. Lots of chaos, lots of unknowing, lots of like getting stuck in and throwing things at you. I think if you were someone that was a real specialist in the military, it's probably not going to be that similar. For anyone who's a bit of a generalist, like, I mean, the gunners are one of the most generalist people out there. We tend to just try and do everything pretty averagely. And that you're going to be a good fit if you're a bit of a generalist, someone who can turn your hand to something, give it a go. That's where I think it's a really, really good fit for veterans. You know, that's where I think it's quite similar.
Yeah, made some really good points there. I think you're right. It does depend on you as a character as well, like, and what you want from your work. And I think for me, the bit I really struggled with was not having an impact at a big corporate business and feeling like a small cog in a very big machine, where you could argue you're a small cog in a big machine in the military, but you know, we all know that you're part of these little tribes in the military. And actually, as a junior officer, as an example, you've got quite a lot of responsibility, and you do have impact in that organization, and you're involved in lots of different things. And that's what I enjoyed. I really liked that about being in the military and being at a battalion, and I missed that when I went into a big corporate. And that's what I get from being in the SME space. But you're right, there's risks associated with that, and there's challenges. And if you are somebody that just wants that, right, what's the next promotion? Where do I get to? Nice pension, you know, all that sort of like, all kind of planned out and mapped out for you, then absolutely do not join an SME, because you're not going to get that. But I think you're right. If it's the impact piece, if you've got a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, then I think, you know, veterans can bring so much to the party in terms of these organizations. And I really feel the culture, it's just a really good fit for people leaving the military.
100%. I think the ability to just give something a crack and give it a go is where the culture really aligns, I think.
Okay, mate. So the important bit. So what advice? I mean, there's loads of advice you've kind of weaved in there throughout the conversation. It's been great there, mate. But what advice would you give to someone just leaving the military today, or even like your younger self when you were getting out? What would be the key bits you'd pass on?
Don't let other people's opinions sway your decision. So like, be fully out for yourself. Lots of people will try and help you. Lots of people will try and guide you to the right direction, but it might not be the right thing for you. So like, not kind of be selfish, but just be like self-aware in what is a good fit for you. And don't be afraid of what others will think when you tell them that you're not going to go work for a Deloitte or whatever, go down that proven route. I think choose something that you're interested in rather than something that you think sounds good. Like, you've come from probably one of the most interesting jobs you'll ever have, if I'm completely honest, being in the military. And you're going to want to try and find something that can fill some of that void. Don't just do something because you've been told it's good, or that kind of thing. And then like, when you get out, just work really hard. Like, don't be somebody who rests on your laurels and, okay, I've come from the army, I'm this person, like, I've got this, be self-entitled. No, be humble, be prepared to go back to like start at the bottom. And like, if you have the right attitude, like, the talent will really come through. They say the cream rises to the top, and I think it really is true. When it comes to like money, salary, titles, it will all come. Patience is something that I think you have to learn when you leave, right? Like, you've left from a position of being like a fairly senior middle manager, I guess, like if you leave as like a captain or a major, and you're not necessarily going to have that same level of responsibility when you leave. And just like, be patient with that, make your peace with it. Like, I left the military 5 years ago. If you'd have asked me, would I be where I am today? Like I would bite your hand off when I'd signed off at 5 days, 5 years ago. On the journey through, have I been impatient? Yes. Have I wanted to move quicker? Do I look left and right at my friends who are maybe in Civvy Street and they've had their career for 15 years doing what they're doing, and I'm like, I want to be where you are. Is that realistic? Probably not, right? But do you back yourself in the next 5 years to accelerate quicker and move on and use all of the skills that you've kind of had? So that would be my advice, I suppose. Be patient. Like plow your own furrow, go and do what you want to do, and then just work really hard when you dive into it. Like the simple bit is just working hard, right?
Seems simple, mate. It seems simple, but it's so true, and some absolute gems of advice there, mate. So I say I've really enjoyed this conversation, Pete. I think everything you've talked about there just rings true, and it's really great to speak to someone who, from the outset, made the shout to be like, I'm not going to take that proven route. I'm going to live more risky, if we're being honest with ourselves, a bit more risky route and a bit more challenging. You signed out an epic there, mate. But fair play, you backed yourself, and I think you can tell you've taken on the lessons and the values and the standards that you learned in the military, and you've applied those into your civilian career. And anyone that can come out at the start of COVID and make a success of things, I think is a really good use case. And so I appreciate your time, mate. It just if anybody who's watching this wants to reach out to you, get involved, I know you're quite active on LinkedIn and stuff. Like, where's the best place to send you a message on LinkedIn? I'm sure you'd be happy to speak to anyone and pass on your advice and knowledge.
Yeah, I speak to hundreds of people every year, right? I've got lots of people who reach out. Just Pete Stanley on LinkedIn, drop me a message. Like, I'm always going to give somebody 30 minutes for a conversation. I think that's like the sort of I suppose the thing that everyone has to pass on to anybody else, right? Like if I was afforded time by a couple of people when I left, and I'm always very happy to pay it back. So if anyone's interested in the world of sales, recruitment, or just generally wants to talk about how you can go and get into an SMB, drop me a message and we can go from there.
Legend. Thanks so much, Pete.
Cheers. Thanks, man.